Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on a Friday. So welcome to T9 Hacks' 5th seminar on children and education. T9 Hacks is happening March 19th to 21st, which is exactly in 2 weeks. So these seminars basically serve to inspire and teach people on the topic at hand. So today we have the amazing Annie Margaret joining us. Thank you so much for being here. I now invite you to introduce yourself.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. Well, hi, everybody. Some familiar faces, some not so familiar. I have slides, so I'm gonna do screen share here. So anyway, I'm Annie Margaret. I work at the Atlas Institute for Creative Technology and Design. And I want to just give a little warning here that what I'm going to present today may feel a bit like doom and gloom. So I'm going to talk about the health impacts of social media on adolescents. Not shockingly, this is not a super uplifting topic, but I will present some optimism at the end. And I also want to say that I'm aware there are many benefits of social media for young people, allowing them to share their creative work, to engage civically in all kinds of new ways. But because we're limited on time today, I'm focusing on presenting the facts as they relate to the mental health and well-being of our young people. And so in my teaching and research, I explore the intersections of technology and addictive design, how the attention economy is affecting our mental health, and how we might use mindfulness to combat the effects of that. I believe in an ethics in which we think about human attention and empathy as finite resources, and that we need to, as educators, empower students with the skills and resilience to thrive in this environment where their attention and emotions are constantly being extracted without our consent. And so just a little bit about what I do. So my research looks at psychotechnologies like meditation and cognitive states that we can develop to counteract the negative impact of social media on our mental health and well-being. And then I am a big proponent of experiential learning. So in the classroom, I try to cultivate contemplative practices that help humans foster these skills of empathy, metacognition, which just means the ability to observe your own thinking and feeling, and interpersonal communication. And I think as the attention and emotion economies continue to grow, these skills are only going to become more and more important. Okay, and what I teach. So I won't spend too much time here, but I want to share a little bit. So I teach the meaning of information technology, which is a big core intro course focused on the coevolution of society, technology, and human psychology. I teach a class called neurohacking, which really just uses hacking as a metaphor to investigate nervous system regulation. So we develop practices to hack the nervous system to achieve desired cognitive states. And we look at meditation and mindfulness practices as activism in the attention economy. I also teach a class called Empathy and Technology, which uses the lens of neuroscience, cognitive science, evolutionary psychology to investigate the creative integration of empathy and compassion in the design of technologies. And here looking at really giving students a way to think about their empathy and emotions as resources and give them agency in how they're distributing those resources. Okay, so that's who I am. And then I like to open with this quote before we get into the facts here about there are only two industries that call their customers users: illegal drugs and software, or in this case, tech companies, however you want to think of it. And again, a warning, please look at the slide here. So if that's uncomfortable to you for any reason, we are going to talk about some sensitive topics. And so if that's uncomfortable or you would prefer not to consume that information, I encourage you to feel free to leave the talk now. Okay, and so with that, so we define tweens as somebody age 11 to 12, 70% of tweens own a smartphone. And when we look at the daily screen use, okay, so this is daily screen use before COVID and not including school or homework. So this is not factoring in Zoom University. Teens spend over 7 hours on a screen, and tweens, who are slightly younger, over 4 hours. And you can see that it, perhaps even more alarmingly, the way it varies by socioeconomic status. So the less money you have, the more time you spend on a screen. This is not okay. These devices are sucking up our attention. And if we think about thinking about our attention as a resource, it also leads to distraction. And so an hour per day is the amount of time most Americans spend dealing with distractions and then getting refocused, which might not seem so bad, an hour a day. But if you think about it over a course of a year, that's 5 weeks worth of time that's being eaten up by the distraction that comes from our digital environment. And it's not only affecting attention, it's also affecting emotional development. So children should be learning these valuable social development skills in the family dynamic. However, children under the age 14 spend nearly twice as long with their devices as they spend in conversation with their families, where they should be developing these emotional competencies. And it's not just the kids who are affected by using their devices, but also the parents. So 50% of parents report that mobile devices interrupt the time they spend with their children 3 or more times a day. And when we look at the interaction of infants and mothers, so they're looking, in this study, they're looking at infant mother pairs. The infants show greater unhappiness, displayed fewer positive emotions, and were significantly less likely to play with their toys when the mother looked at their device for as little as 2 minutes. So very, very young children are picking up on the fact that mom isn't paying attention to me. And it doesn't take long, right? In as little as 2 minutes, the child is also disengaged from eye contact, from play, from these critical learning opportunities. And I'll cite one more study here. Also, just the presence of a phone on the table. So if you have a phone, you're interacting with someone where you're expecting quality time, you have a phone on the table, but you're not interacting with it. Just the presence of the phone, people report feeling less connected to the person they were spending time with. Even if the person never interacted with the device, it didn't ring, it didn't buzz, just the fact that it was sitting on the table. And so all this is to say, I know it sounds like a lot of really dark things here, but I want to be clear that this is not the kids or the parents' fault. Like, a lot of the statistics I've listed say kids are doing this and parents are doing this, spending this much time. But it's not the kids or the parents' fault. There are teams of designers and psychologists who intentionally design these platforms to be addictive or to keep you on them for as long as possible. So the principles of addictive design, things like pull to refresh, mimic the slot machine, pull lever. Other applications of this include, have you ever thought about why your notification bubbles are red rather than blue or green? It's because you won't care about them as much if they're blue or green as you do if they're red. The idea of variable rewards. Every time you retweet something or post a photo, you have no idea how many little affirmation notifications that post is going to give you. So this is the concept of variable reward, which has been studied in psychology with rats for years and years. Basically, that rats will spend a lot more time near a lever pushing it if they don't know what they're going to get. So this concept of variable reward, whether the reward is food or cocaine or whatever, the rats will stay there as long as it's a variable reward they're getting. And it turns out humans act the same way with social media. And it was designed around this principle. Okay, and so not surprisingly, this leads to a fair amount of people feeling addicted. So 50% of teens report feeling addicted to their devices. 27% of parents report feeling addicted to their devices. And this addictive nature harvests our attention, but there's also an emotional component in that social media manufactures and sells outrage. So anger is the emotion, they've studied this, anger is the emotion that travels the farthest, has the greatest reach on social media compared to all other emotions. And so content is more likely to be upvoted, passed on, reposted if it promotes outrage of some kind. And so this is affecting pro-social behavior. This is another study showing that 2 minutes, as little as 2 minutes of exposure to a conspiracy theory video reduces people's pro-social attitudes or their willingness to help others. And so in short, our views of each other are changing, and it can become habitual to be mean or unkind, provoking outrage on social media. And we see this play out in cyberbullying as well. So there are serious consequences for the mental health, as we can see here, of those who have experienced cyberbullying. And here, on the slide, I'm just showing more stats about children who experience cyberbullying are more likely to engage in risk-taking behavior. Teenage girls are more likely to show lifetime use of drugs. The amount of time spent using social media is significantly correlated with later levels of substance use. And so, again, to be clear and to not over dramatize conclusions here, we as good scientists know correlation is not causation, right? And at the same time, it is because of the amount of variables involved, it's really challenging to study social media use in a causative way, because human beings are complex and we have a lot of variables involved in just being us. And so all of that is to say, I think pointing out these types of correlations between cyberbullying and health outcomes is still significant, and correlation is not necessarily causation. Okay, and so in addition to cyberbullying, we also see this impacting particularly adolescent females in terms of body image. So time spent on Instagram increases the likelihood of suffering from a whole variety of eating disorders. And in this case, it to the best of that they were able to study, it is actually causative, not just correlated. And Instagram specifically, because the culture of that platform focuses on curating perfect images, it's not really surprising that other platforms don't have this same effect. And again, related to body image, there is a term in the in the DSM called Snapchat dysmorphia, which has come to exist because of the number of young people, particularly teenagers, going to a plastic surgeon asking to be made to look like their Snapchat filter. This was happening with such frequency that they gave it a name, Snapchat dysmorphia. And so obviously the excessive use of social media has many negative impacts on the health and well-being of our young people. Not surprisingly, it's correlated with, it's a significant predictor of depression levels. So for every increased hour spent using social media, teens show a 2% increase in depressive symptoms, which 2% might not seem like a lot, but in this case, it is a causative effect, which again, very difficult to study. And this one's from the Journal of American Medical Association of Pediatrics. So very trustworthy, probably not overinflating their results. Okay, and now for a concluding, no, I'm not concluding, but we're getting close. This is really sad. So if we look at this data is taken from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, looking at suicide rates among girls aged 10 to 14 and 15 to 19. And we see a fairly stable rate from 1999 to 2009, and dramatic increases since 2009. 2009 also happens to be the year social media became available on mobile devices. Around that time, became widely available. And again, correlation is not causation, but it's certainly worth considering that there might be something of interest going on here. We see a similar thing with self-harm, where there's kind of a fairly stable level, particularly in girls aged 10 to 14, fairly stable level in recent past up until 2009, where now we see a 189% increase. And this is taken from pediatricians' offices. So you go to a pediatrician up until you're 18, and so they're collecting the data that way. And so hopefully our young people can manage to avoid the psychological harm of these kind of image-driven comparison platforms. And let's say they're spending their time consuming the news or educational content. There's a lot of good content on social media too, right? It's not all damaging. And the new opportunities to be an active participant in civic discourse that are offered by social media, particularly to young people, are amazing. This is taken from Dana Boyd, It's Complicated, which summarizes the social lives of networked teens, particularly aimed at parents, but talking about this idea that these new opportunities to participate in public life are actually what's making adults anxious, not the fact that it's so bad necessarily, but that they're scared of the power of the young people. And I think that might be true. And more than half of US middle schoolers cannot distinguish advertising from news. So this was a study done on thousands of middle schoolers conducted by researchers at Stanford, basically polling them on, is this an advertisement or is this a news story? And even when it said things like sponsored content, they still couldn't tell the difference. And so this sort of idea that if it's viral, it must be true is fairly popular. And this is going to have pretty significant consequences for civic discourse if we don't address this with formal education in the public school system as soon as possible. And the fact that we don't have formal education for how trying to help young people navigate this social space that they're so embedded in. If you remember from earlier in the talk, over 7 hours a day. We should really address this to give these young people the skills and knowledge that are necessary to make sense of a mediated world. We all have a lot to learn here. And thankfully, there are people working on this. So Common Sense Education is a branch of Common Sense Media, which maybe you've heard of, I don't know. Check it out, excellent organization. The digital citizenship curriculum was developed by education researchers at Stanford or at Harvard and a few other institutions that I can't recall. But they have a full curriculum for grades K through 12 around digital citizenship. So media balance and well-being, relationships and communication, how to handle cyberbullying. So there are people who are developing really good programming to try to address these issues, to try to empower students with the skills that they need here. And then I'll just offer a few of my own favorite resources here. I mentioned this book earlier, but It's Complicated by Dana Boyd. Has a slightly more positive spin than what I've presented here today. It includes some of the same information as what I've presented, but kind of takes this conclusion that, the kids are going to be all right. They're okay. And that living life in a world where you're so constantly connected is really complex. And that we really need to be helping our teenagers in their ability to become informed and engaged citizens through their online interactions. If you've seen any of my other content, I tout this one all the time. The Center for Humane Technology is dedicated to imagining our digital infrastructure in new ways that are going to support human well-being, support our agency to make choices in what we're doing. Lots of really, really good resources on their page about tips and tricks and things you can do to clean up your own digital habits. Really great resource there. Common Sense Education, like I mentioned, has a digital citizenship program for grades K through 12. And all of the curriculum is free. So if you know anybody in this age group, you can direct them here, or if you know educators who would be interested in this, please, please, please do that. And I'm also, obviously, if you're speaking about this, so I also care deeply about this issue. My work in progress is here, so you can, my website is actually not currently live because I'm redesigning it, but it will be very shortly, probably by next week. And then I have a few research projects that look at the relationship between mindfulness and meditation and students' relationships with their smartphones and social media in college students. And then I'm also developing a digital wellness summer program for middle school females. So I'm developing it over the course of the next year. It will be available in summer of 2022. And so this looks to address the negative impacts of social media on adolescent female psychological well-being, basically through education and providing digital literacy skills, encouraging healthy and intentional relationships with smartphones and social media, both through decreased consumption, but also cultivating interpersonal skills, self-confidence. And we'll also be teaching a set of specific mindfulness practices that have been proven to increase compassion for the self and others, to improve attentional control, and to strengthen emotional regulation. And so I'm really looking forward to this. Also, shameless self-promotion. I need this grant for the summer program just got funded. So I'm looking for research assistants and program facilitators. So if anyone knows, if either yourself or you know someone who's interested in this topic, please send me an email. And I really think that both the program I'm developing along with, there's a lot, like I showed all the resources, other groups working on this. We can give young people the agency to live lives that are their own and to make empowered choices regarding how they're using social media for civic engagement, education, and to help them live the lives that they really want to be living. Yeah, and that's all I have. You can email me here, reach out. I'm going to stop talking now and maybe take questions if anybody has any. Thank you.